Coming up on Arirang News. With an outpouring of support, former President Trump is officially nominated as the Republican presidential candidate, while Ohio Senator J.D. Vance is announced as Trump's running mate. This comes 2 days after Trump survived an assassination attempt in the state of Pennsylvania. The National Intelligence Service has confirmed that a North Korean diplomat stationed in Cuba defected to South Korea in November last year. Lee is the highest-ranking North Korean diplomat to defect since Tae-Yong-ho in 2016. South Korea set a record high for auto exports for the first half of this year, on the back of greater exports to North America and expanding demand for hybrid cars. Welcome to the 9 p.m. edition of Arirang News. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. Over in the U.S., former President Trump was officially nominated as the Republican presidential candidate 2 days after he survived an assassination attempt at a rally. He picked Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, a critic-turned-supporter, as his running mate. Our Shin Ha-young begins our coverage.
Former President Donald Trump made his first public appearance at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee on Monday, 2 days after the rally shooting. With a bandage over his right ear injured during the assassination attempt on Saturday, he entered the convention arena with a raised face greeting cheering supporters. 2,400 delegates from across the United States gathered on Monday to officially nominate Trump as the party's presidential candidate during a roll call vote.
The great state of Nevada proudly casts all of its 26 votes for President Donald J. Trump.
Trump officially became the 2024 Republican presidential nominee after surpassing the delegate majority threshold following a speech by his son, Eric Trump.
Hereby declaring him the Republican nominee for President of the United States of America.
After an acceptance speech on the final day of the convention on Thursday, Trump would then be in place for a possible rerun of the 2020 election against Joe Biden on November 5th, although the incumbent president is facing increasing pressure from within his party not to run. Trump also announced his running mate on Monday, selecting a hardline conservative Ohio Senator J.D. Vance as his vice presidential pick. The 39-year-old, who once said he was an anti-Trump Republican, has since become a supporter. Vance gained prominence with the release of his memoir Hillbilly Elegy, which reflects on his upbringing and growing up in a low-income family involved in violence and addiction in Middletown, Ohio, known as a part of America's Rust Belt. Trump's decision is seen as a strategic move, as there is an anticipation that Vance's Rust Belt background will resonate with voters in critical swing states such as Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. On Monday, it was also reported that Trump's criminal case over the mishandling of classified documents had been dismissed. A Trump-appointed U.S. district judge in Florida ruled that the appointment of special counsel Jack Smith, who filed the indictment against Trump, was unlawful. However, Smith's team indicated that they would appeal the decision. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Wall Street closed at fresh highs on Monday following the failed assassination attempt against the former U.S. president. Lee Seung-jae explains.
It was feared that the weekend assassination attempt on U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump would bring uncertainty to the U.S. financial market. However, Wall Street responded with a record-high close for the Dow Jones and S&P 500 indexes. The Dow Jones closed up 210.82 points, or 0.53% from the previous trading session, to end Monday's trading session at a fresh record high of 40,211.72. The S&P 500, which has seen all-time highs being shattered regularly throughout the year, saw yet another record high, finishing the day at 5,631.22, up 15.87 points, or 0.28% from the previous trading session. Monday's trading also saw a number of stocks linked to Trump or his policies jump. Trump Media, the parent company of social networking service Truth Social, soared 31.4%, while Tesla, whose CEO Elon Musk has openly expressed his support for Trump, also closed up 1.8%. Energy-related stocks like ExxonMobil and Chevron and the health insurance stocks like United Health rose due to expectations of deregulation following a possible Trump re-election. The market expectation is that if Trump does win the November U.S. presidential election, he will strengthen trade barriers, expand tax cuts, and ease regulations related to cryptocurrency and climate change responses. Meanwhile, Wall Street also responded positively to the increasing prospects of a September rate cut. U.S. Fed Chair Jerome Powell at an event at the Economic Club of Washington on Monday said that U.S. inflation data over the second quarter of this year added somewhat to confidence that the economy is on pace to reach the central bank's target inflation of 2%. While Powell did not directly mention a September rate cut, his comments suggest such a decision may not be far off. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news, a high-ranking North Korean diplomat based in Cuba is confirmed to have defected to South Korea last year. The news comes as the latest in a series of defections by members of the North Korean elite in recent years. Our Kim Jong-sil has the details.
A senior North Korean diplomat based in Cuba defected to the South last November. On Tuesday, the National Intelligence Service said that media reports on the defection of a North Korean counselor of political affairs in Cuba were factual. The NIS gave no further details. A South Korean newspaper, the Joseonilbo, reported early Tuesday that 52-year-old Lee Il-gyu fled to the South with his wife and children. Lee, a leading expert on relations with Cuba, reportedly left around the time South Korea was actively communicating with Cuba ahead of establishing diplomatic ties in February. He told the paper any North Korean resident would think of wanting to live in South Korea at least once, adding that he felt irritation with the North Korean regime, pessimism about the future, and desire to escape these as his motivation for fleeing. Lee's defection made headlines as he is one of the highest-ranking North Korean diplomats made public to have defected in recent years. The acting ambassadors to Italy and Kuwait defected in 2019, while the defection by Tae Young-ho, the former deputy ambassador to the UK in 2016, remains that of the highest-ranked diplomat to come to the South. Pundits say the continued defections of senior North Korean diplomats indicate that members of the elite in the North are becoming increasingly disillusioned with the Kim Jong-un regime. Their situation of being stationed abroad could also make it easier for them to defect. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
The North Korean leader's sister, Kim Yo-jong, threatened South Korea would face devastating consequences if it sends more anti-regime leaflets into the North. In a statement on Tuesday, Kim said Pyongyang had found 29 large balloons carrying leaflets near the inter-Korean border and other areas. Kim said North Korea would have to inevitably change the manner of its response if more of such, quote, dirty acts continued. The statement comes just 2 days after its rare release of a photo showing anti-Pyongyang leaflets being set on fire. Previously, Pyongyang had sent trash-filled balloons in response to anti-North Korea leaflets sent by North Korean defectors. The commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command spoke to the South Korean media for the first time on the sidelines of the Rim of the Pacific exercise held in Hawaii, covering a range of key security issues. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung brings us the highlights.
In his first interview with the South Korean media since taking office in May, Commander Samuel Paparo of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command has emphasized the importance of denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula.
The developments in North Korea are very, very concerning to everybody, and we seek the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula at all times. We're equal partners with South Korea. And in the spirit of Washington, we've established a nuclear consultative group. Through the nuclear consultative group, we're in a constant dialogue at very high levels of secrecy to find a strategic way ahead to deal with the issue.
Speaking with Arirang News and 6 other domestic media outlets in Hawaii last Thursday on the sidelines of the Rim of the Pacific maritime exercise, Paparo also responded to questions about the growing calls within South Korea to possess nuclear weapons, including nuclear-powered submarines.
From the standpoint of submarine warfare, I think it's important as allies and partners to find the most efficient and the most effective way as allies and partners to combine our capabilities in ways that most effectively defend our alliances and partnerships. If the operational analysis leads us to believe that, then we can move forward at a later date.
Though the commander did not offer further comments, it was the first time for a top U.S. military commander to directly address Seoul's pursuit of nuclear submarines. Paparo also affirmed that the U.S. forces in South Korea will not be relocated in the event of a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Concerns about a possible relocation have been growing, with China reportedly seeking to build a military capable of doing so by 2027.
Well, we'd have no plans to relocate any of the capability on the Korean Peninsula just because of the solidness of our alliance. And any combat plans that we'd have would be global plans to deal with all threats.
The commander also praised South Korea's leadership role in the Indo-Pacific.
You ask about Korea's leadership role in the Indo-Pacific. And I think the ambitions of Korea's leadership says it all. Global, pivotal state. I'll also mention, too, the trilateral with Republic of Korea, Japan, and the United States. And so Republic of Korea is just expressing a tremendous leadership role throughout the Indo-Pacific and, in fact, through the globe.
The commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command is responsible for U.S. forces deployed on approximately half of the Earth's surface. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol says South Korea's alliance with the U.S. is now, quote, truly nuclear-based. Remarks to this end were shared on Tuesday during his cabinet meeting following his attendance at the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. last week. There, he and his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden signed a joint statement ushering in guidelines on nuclear deterrence on the Korean Peninsula. President Yoon also touched upon his separate bilateral engagements with 13 world leaders on the sidelines of the Security Summit and called on his cabinet for follow-up measures. South Korea saw an all-time high for auto exports in the first half of 2024. That was mainly attributed to a robust performance, especially in North America, along with greater sales of hybrid cars globally. Park Gun-woo tells us more.
South Korea's automobile exports reached a record high in the first half of this year. Data from the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy on Tuesday showed that the value of automobile exports from January to June was over $37 billion. That's an on-year increase of 3.8%. The ministry said expanding demand and sales of hybrid cars and increased exports to North America were behind South Korea's performance. Specifically, exports to North America jumped 26% compared to a year before, reaching nearly $22 billion. That's in contrast to a decrease in exports to all the other regions during the first half of 2024. The ministry said the drop in outbound shipments to the European market was mainly due to subsidy suspensions for electric cars and unsold inventory from last year. In June alone, export value was around $6.2 billion, similar to last year, despite fewer working days. That continued a run of monthly auto export value above $6 billion in 7 of the last 8 months, with February being an exception due to the Lunar New Year holiday. By region, outbound shipments to North America surpassed $3.6 billion. Exports to the Middle East also saw an increase for the first time in 8 months in June. Production dropped slightly by 2% on year due to a base effect. The industry ministry said better performance is expected for the second half of the year on increased productivity and a return to full-scale production at a Kia factory in Gwangmyeong in July after a refit. The ministry added it will be supporting companies so that the country can reach its export goal of $100 billion for cars and auto parts for this year. Park Geun-woo, Arirang News.
Turning to the medical dispute, the majority of trainee doctors in the country have yet to return to their work sites, past the deadline for acceptance of their resignation letters delivered earlier, leaving hospitals struggling to process these en masse. Moon Hae-ryun explains.
A day after the deadline for hospitals to begin processing their resignations passed, trainee doctors are remaining resolute in their decision not to return to work to protest the government's medical reform. Data from the government and medical organizations showed on Tuesday that out of 13,756 trainee doctors nationwide, only between 40 to 50 interns and residents had returned to work by Monday. Only 7 out of 520 trainee doctors at the country's Big Five hospitals, including Seoul National University and Severance hospitals, had reported for duty, with Korea University's Annam Hospital stating that only 1 trainee doctor had returned to work. The government previously said that resignation forms would start to be automatically processed if the doctors did not state their intention to return, prompting concerns that mass resignations would be inevitable. Many hospitals are currently waiting for responses and are putting processing on hold for the time being. The olive branch extended by the government in an attempt to end the prolonged walkout has been met with a lukewarm response from trainee doctors so far. Speaking at a plenary session, the country's health minister admitted that there could be more resigning than those returning to work, and spoke of planning more concrete policies to persuade them to resume their training in September. Last week, the government withdrew punitive measures against trainee doctors defying return-to-work orders and promised special benefits to those who reapply to training hospitals later this year. Meanwhile, a briefing from the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters stressed that medical reform cannot be delayed, and the doctors should give it a chance instead of taking collective action even before its implementation. Hospitals are also due to submit the number of trainee doctor slots available for recruits in the second half of the year to the Ministry of Health and Welfare by Wednesday. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
The recent development of early diagnosis and treatment for breast cancer has produced higher survival rates. But there are still many patients who suffer from side effects after surgery. Domestic researchers have discovered that there are better outcomes in recovery from breast cancer if the patient starts to exercise right after surgery. Pyongyang has the story.
South Korean women have a higher rate of contracting breast cancer as opposed to colorectal or thyroid cancers, but early diagnosis has raised the survival rate to 93.8% over 5 years after it is discovered. However, many breast cancer patients suffer from side effects following surgery, such as difficulty in moving the related shoulder in daily life.
Lots of patients think that exercise is good for breast cancer. However, most of them do not know how and when to exercise. We discovered that the movement of shoulders improved with strategic exercise after surgery.
Researchers closely monitored breast cancer patients over 5 years post-surgery, and those who started exercising right after their operation recovered up to 85.7% of their shoulder muscle strength, while those who didn't exercise recovered for only 17.9%. This result shows that it is better for the recovery of shoulder muscle strength of patients if they start exercising sooner.
Patients should gradually exercise from 2 to 3 times a week until they get sweaty. It definitely helps to improve the quality of life if patients exercise consistently.
The researchers noted that rehabilitation outcomes would be good enough if patients continued the exercise at home after learning them. Also, depending on the patient's condition, they can start exercising the day after surgery since there are no side effects. 차윤경, Arirang News.
Over in London, K-pop boy band Stray Kids lit up one of the UK's largest music festivals this past Sunday. The 8-member group made its debut as headliners on the last day of this year's British Summertime Hyde Park Festival, a first for a K-pop boy band. Stray Kids performed about 20 songs over some 2 hours in front of a reported audience of some 50,000. The group's headlining performance follows Blackpink's debut last year at the same festival, which marked the first in K-pop history. In other news, an unprecedented heat dome is suffocating many states in the U.S., leading to concerning civilian casualties. Yoon has more.
At least 38 people are suspected to have died in 6 states this summer from heat-related illnesses caused by new record-breaking temperatures. That heat wave is now spreading to the East Coast, with more than 140 million Americans in 33 states under some extent of heat alert for Tuesday. Meteorologists warn that temperatures will climb above the historical average, extending heat alerts from Maine to Florida, with health departments preparing for heat-related emergencies. Major cities along the East Coast, including Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, were put under an excessive heat warning. And in Philadelphia, the heat index, which is what the temperature feels like with humidity, has been forecast to reach 40 degrees Celsius. New York City and Boston are under a heat advisory through Tuesday. In southeast Texas, hundreds of thousands of residents have been left without power after being hit by Hurricane Beryl earlier in the week and are now left to get through the scorching heat. As of Monday afternoon, over 280,000 still had no power. Las Vegas set a new all-time heat record of 120 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly 49 degrees Celsius, on July 7th, then set a new record of 7 straight days of temperatures at or above 46 degrees Celsius. Such temperatures have turned the Las Vegas Valley into a giant oven, forcing officials to close public pools and museums in order to keep people indoors for most of the day. Weather conditions have become intolerable even for those used to extreme desert climate. Meteorologists say the heat will be concentrated on the East Coast on Tuesday and could last into Wednesday, but a cold front will bring an end to the record heat in the East by Wednesday night. Yoon, Arirang News.
Heavy rain in South Korea's southern regions on Tuesday led to flooding of houses, bus terminals, and restaurants. A total of 22 damage reports were filed in Gyeongsang-namdo province, mainly concentrated in the Namhae area, which saw more than 202 millimeters of rain. The province's Disaster and Safety Countermeasure Headquarters raised the emergency response system to level 2, which is issued once heavy rain warnings are issued across more than 3 areas. President Yoon has urged relevant ministries to monitor the situation closely and strengthen the inspections of areas vulnerable to rain, such as mountainsides and semi-basement flats. Heavy rain will be concentrated in the Seoul metropolitan area from tonight. Up to 60 millimeters per hour will fall in the capital area, but 70 in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province. A preliminary heavy rain warning has been issued in these areas. This heavy rain will persist until Thursday. As for the amount of rain, up to 250 millimeters will pour over northern areas of Gyeonggi-do province until Thursday. Other parts of the capital area and western areas of Gangwon-do province are expected to receive up to 150 millimeters of monsoon rain. Tomorrow, Seoul, Daejeon, and Busan will start off at 24 degrees Celsius. It will move slightly up to 26 in Seoul and Chuncheon, Gwangju and Daegu, 31 degrees. The monsoon rain will continue for the whole week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world. That's all we have for today. Thank you for watching. Arirang News will be back at 9 a.m. Korea time.